is pesticide-free gardening? Well, I'm using that term in terms of an ecological gardening context, and we're going to talk about what those terms mean to me. But at its core, what I'm talking about is gardening or farming in a way that doesn't use any insecticides, any herbicides, or any fungicides, either chemical or organic versions of those. So it is essentially not going out and intentionally killing anything that is in the garden. So I'm going to tell you today about my story, my journey of how I decided to go down this path and how it's working out for me. How did I decide to go down this pathway? Well, I heard about a concept. I was listening to podcasts and I was reading books that was saying that healthy plants and healthy soil do not suffer from pest and disease problems. And I was like, okay, well, that's an interesting concept. I wasn't sure if that was true, but I decided that I was going to give it a go, because if it was true, it was a pretty powerful idea and a powerful concept that lined up with how I already was trying to do things. So I was not using any chemicals in my garden already, but I was, when needed, using organic-based things to deal with aphid pressures or slugs, things like that. And my plants definitely were getting diseases as the growing season wore on. So I thought, well, you know what? Let's give this a try and see how I can make it work. One of the main sources of information that I used to help me learn about this process was the Regenerative Agriculture Podcast, hosted by John Kempf. Now, that podcast is focused mostly on commercial, large-scale growers that are moving to a regenerative agriculture process and way of being. So what I tried to do was translate that information on that big scale down to a small scale. So rather than coming from an organic gardening, permaculture, small-scale perspective, I went to the big scale and took it down to small. And that has been working really well. Now, one thing to keep in mind with going down this journey is that it is not an all or nothing thing. It is a process. You can't just suddenly quit all of the things you've been using to support your plants and expect great results to happen. You've got to make changes over time and step in to intervene with maybe using an organic insecticide or something if a crop is starting to get damaged to the point that it's becoming a problem. And that has been a journey for me. I didn't just go cold turkey one day and stop using everything, but it is a process. So do not let perfect be the enemy of good. So what did I do? How did I get started? Well, I changed my perspective. Instead of wringing my hands in despair about a pest or a disease showing up in my garden, I tried to use that situation to learn from. Why? Why was that pest or disease showing up, and was there something I could do about it? Sometimes I could, sometimes I couldn't. But it's a change of mindset to ask the question. Instead of going in with a solution to that problem, I thought about why that problem was happening in the first place. And that is the process by which I started to put in place the systems that I've done lots of videos about here on the channel, where I'm using worm compost, the chicken yard compost, specific micronutrients in the soil, things like that. So I brought those systems online. I focused heavily on the health of the soil and also on the micronutrients that the soil needed, that the plants needed to have good, healthy plant immune systems and be able to stay healthy from the start of the growing season to the end of it. Now, I haven't succeeded 100% every year with every plant, but I am a lot further along than when I started. One of the main changes that I made was growing lots and lots of different plants together in one garden bed. So instead of having my tomato garden bed and my pumpkin garden bed and my pepper garden bed, I grew everything all together all the time, and I put in a whole bunch of other plants to grow with them. Things that we wouldn't necessarily be eating, but that supported the ecosystem of that garden bed. So I thought of each garden bed and those garden beds collectively together in the space that they're in as being an ecosystem where each thing was helping and influencing the other things in the system. So I grow things like nasturtiums and marigolds and calendula and clover and alfalfa all throughout my growing tomatoes and everything else. And that also brings in the pollinators and allows for habitat for things, insects, bugs that eat the pest bugs, so that they can remain in the system all year round. So when pest populations start to increase, which they will do, this isn't a system where there are just no insect pests and no diseases. It's about the balance of how much of an impact that those pests and diseases can have. So pests start to build up, and then the predators are already there and they come in and they deal with it. So growing heaps of things together in massive, crazy, chaotic polycultures has been my number one tactic for making this work. All of the other things, the soil health and the micronutrients, while really important, I don't think would be able to have as much of an impact as growing so many different kinds of plants together. I feel like it's really, really important to do that in a small system where you are hand harvesting and hand dealing with the garden as a whole, whereas you can't really do that at quite the same level on a large scale. So that's a huge benefit you have on small scale gardening. The insect pests that I was dealing with when I started this process were aphids, stink bugs, and slugs and snails. Now, all of those things are still present in my system. They haven't magically gone away, but they are not able to build up population numbers. And if they are building up population numbers, I'm not seeing it. And they're not having such an impact on my crops that they are in any way reducing the harvests that I get, and the plants are staying alive and healthy and happy, even if they're getting the occasional nibble by one of these pests. Slugs and snails were the hardest one to deal with. I did have to continue using a little bit of organic slug bait for longer than I wanted to, but I now no longer have to use it. There are still slugs and snails galore on my property, but they are not creating any kind of negative impact. They're having a nibble, but they are not decimating an entire seedling. I am now able to direct sow seeds into the soil, even things like beans, which I definitely couldn't direct sow before. And those beans are coming up and the slugs and snails are not mowing them down. And the concept behind that is that those plants are now so healthy that the slugs and snails don't view them as food anymore. Because the role of insect pests, we'll call them pests, but really they're not pests. Their role is to clear up weak and dying plants. If a plant is healthy, it shouldn't be the job of the insect to eat it. So with that mindset, you can really see what the health of your garden is. If it is getting decimated by pest insects, then those plants are not healthy. They are not making food for people and for animals like chickens and cows and sheep. They're making food for bugs. Bugs who have simple digestive systems, who can only handle simple foods, which is why they are supposed to be decomposers and clearing away the weak. It is nature's way of balancing the system, and if we view them like that, they can give us huge amounts of information as to the quality of the food that we're growing for ourselves. Ecological or regenerative style gardening is based on a shift in mindset. You have to look at the world with different eyes so that you can make actions that have a positive impact rather than a negative impact on what you're doing. So you need to think of everything as being a constantly shifting balance. Every action that you take as the steward, as the keeper of that land will have consequences, both positive and negative, for different things in the system. So we really have to consider what actions we are taking and the potential consequences those actions have before we take that action. And of course, I've made mistakes and you'll make mistakes. This is not something we have a huge amount of science in and a lot of information about exactly what to do when, but I don't think we're going to get very specific information in this space anyway, because it is guided by so many natural variables. You always need to think before you act in your ecological gardening system, because the consequences can be severe or maybe not severe, but you don't know unless you think about it first, and maybe still unintended things will happen. Healthy soil requires healthy plants, and healthy plants require healthy soil. They are one symbiotic organism working together. Honestly, I am not sure if plants and soil are even separate from each other. The soil is sort of the digestive system of the plants. It is the communication system of the plants, and the plants feed the soil from the processes that they do. They just work together. There is not one without the other, and you can really see that quite clearly when you are doing more artificial things with your plants and your soil. So I do have some greenhouses, and I do grow in my greenhouses, not for the whole season, but they'll start there in the springtime and things like that, or over winter. And I will absolutely have problems with pests and diseases in my greenhouse, which will be solved within days if I move the plants out and put them in the garden. It is very common that as we come into the later spring and I've got something in the greenhouse, that it will become covered in aphids. And that is a good signal to me that it is no longer suitable for that plant to be in the greenhouse. It needs to come out. If I bring it out, leave it in the garden where there are growing plants around it, the aphids will be gone in 24 hours. It's quite magical and a lot cheaper than doing any other kind of intervention. The information that I have based building my system on has come from large-scale commercial operations. So from that perspective, I do not have all of the tools available to me that they do at large scale. It's not economic or even accessible for things like sap testing or tissue analysis, and even here to have soil tests is extremely expensive. So I'm sort of rocking on observation and asking questions and seeing what happens when I try one thing and try another thing. So I'm sort of running lots of little mini experiments to be able to get the information that I need to move forward, but there is information available that is sort of applicable across the board, and I can do an intervention like adding micronutrients to my seed raising mix or out onto the garden if I'm seeing a deficiency symptom arise, or if something's just not going right. There is information available to go ahead and do that. I just can't do the pre-testing to find out if that is absolutely actually the problem. But that's okay. It's really allowed me to get to know my garden, to know my plants, to know the system, because I have to go out and look and listen and try things, which gives me a much better relationship than making it somebody else's decision making by sending something off for testing. So while I love data and science, it has been actually good not having that available to me, because I've really had to think about it for myself. If you're interested in learning more about regenerative and ecological gardening, and you would like more specific videos on things like how calcium interacts in plants and soils and the role that nitrogen plays in all its different forms, then let me know in the comments. I would love to do more videos on this topic. It's something I'm really passionate about, but I'm just not sure if other people are interested too.